Welcome to the Unfettered Speech podcast. I'm Leonard Goodman,
Hi, I'm Luis Diaz Perez.
and we have a very special guest today, Omali Yeshitela, political activist and author who has for more than 50 years been fighting for African people to be free from colonialism and exploitation. He's been fighting for free speech and political power for African Americans in this country and all over the world, really. And he's also the co-founder of the African People Socialist Party, also known as the Yahoo movement. So welcome, Omali. Thank you for coming on our podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm really proud to be here to share the space with you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And we're really proud to have you on. I want to start out with a little personal note. I first became aware of you and your work through your presentations on Black Agenda Radio and on Black Agenda Report, and your collaboration with my former co-worker and late friend Bruce Dixon, and as well as Glenn Ford. And we had Leonard and I have had opportunities in the past also to engage with Glenn Ford, and so we were always very impressed with their work and the work of that collaborative, and of course with your contributions. And I think that might be a good place for us to start our conversation today, to get your sense of where Black journalism is today and what you see the trajectory for critical Black voices in journalism.
Well, that's an interesting question, partially because a problem that I have had recently with what's characterized as Black journalism is this false notion of objectivism, that one's not supposed to take sides on any kind of question. And that doesn't happen in any journalism. It's almost impossible to do that. There's always a foundational premise that all of these discussions and everything that's done via journalism occur. And I grew up during a period where there were a lot of small Black newspapers, community newspapers, and these were newspapers that were necessary because the media of the ruling class did not give us space easily. And but many of these small publications, they would do things like print funeral notices and weddings, and about weddings, and also who was going to prison, etc. People wanted it though because they could find themselves in there some way or another. Outstanding newspapers of the time were the Pittsburgh Courier, that stretched all across the country. Everybody wanted to find a copy of the Pittsburgh Courier. In fact, the Nation of Islam initially used to Elijah Muhammad used to have a column in the Pittsburgh Courier. That's how African people first discovered it, before Malcolm X created Muhammad Speaks in the basement right there. No, that wasn't out in Chicago. That was in New York. But he initiated Muhammad Speaks, and Muhammad Speaks, I think, created a whole different template for how we should deal with media. I have to stop though and say that this was preceded by this extraordinary publication, of the Universal Negro Improvement Associations and African Communities League, led by Marcus Garvey, that printed the Negro World. And this publication was everywhere. It was all over the world. It was a publication that made no pretexts of being neutral when it came to the struggle of Black people. It laid out what it is that we needed to do, etc. In fact, there was a publication that was printed in 3 languages, and it was a publication that was utilized by Sandino in Nicaragua, because the American censors didn't pay attention to the Spanish language portion of that newspaper. And so in many ways, Garvey's newspaper was able to facilitate the struggles of Sandino the area where they spoke in Nicaragua. So that was something that really, I think, set the terms. And it was something that was banned in most places, and you just had African sailors who would sew the paper into their coats and things like that, and go into different countries and distribute it just to get the word out, to help people learn about the struggle for black freedom. So this was Marcus Garvey in the Negro World, which was an extraordinary publication. And then Muhammad Speaks, that was the newspaper of the Nation of Islam, the original Nation of Islam. It had something like a million subscribers. It was publishing, like once a week. It was an extraordinary publication. And it contributed, it gave images of what being a free black people would be about. It showed black people who were actually producing things, who were actually engineers, and who were flying airplanes and doing the kinds of things that were denied African people, generally speaking, in this country, most of the world. And also some of the most graphic photos that you want to see of what U.S. military was doing in Vietnam, you found them in Muhammad Speaks. You could see the murder, that was happening there. So that was important. Then we had, right there out of Chicago, we had Jet Magazine and Ebony. And if you remember, if you may be familiar, that was Jet Magazine that published the pictures of Emmett Till after he had been murdered there in Philadelphia, Mississippi, and after they finally found his body, and when they had his funeral, they wanted to close the casket, and his mother demanded that the casket be left open. And this picture of this grotesque body that had been in a state of decay and other forms of experiencing other forms of brutality, the world saw that because she wanted the world to see what they had done to her child. And that was Jet Magazine that did that. And that was right out of Chicago. And of course, out of Jet Magazine, Ebony Magazine, owned by the Johnsons, if I'm not mistaken, they did other extraordinary work for a while. They published volumes of black history that became available to African people. So this is the kind of stuff we had access to. And this was, just some of the great newspapers and other mediums that were available to us at different periods of time. The Black Panther newspaper, of course, it was the Nation of Islam that started the What We Want, What We Believe, and let this out. So you had a program in each issue of the newspaper. You picked up the newspaper, you saw their program. And this was Malcolm X. And then the Black Panther Party did a similar thing and had a 10-point program, What We Want, What We Believe. And so now you see the newspapers, like with Marcus Garvey, becoming instruments of actual liberation movements, struggles. So there was no pretext here of some kind of bourgeois objectivism, etc. This was something that says that we're on the side of the oppressed, we're on the side of black people, we want freedom, etc., and stated it, in no uncertain terms. There came a point where in this country, in the 1960s, you heard a common refrain. When we would call a press conference, because what happened was we would learn what we were doing, each of us were doing, by reading the ruling class newspapers. Right. I would read a newspaper and they said, this organization in Philadelphia did such and such a thing, and this is what they demanded. I said, wow, that's a great demand. And then I would add it to what it is that I was doing in Florida, et cetera. So pretty soon, we saw coming as if a meeting had been held, a determination that our press conferences, the things that we were trying to do, that we were manipulating the press. That's the term they began to use, saying we were manipulating the press. And so they stopped printing anything, generally speaking, of most things that were coming from those of us who were characterized as radical and challenging. So became, like an issue that we had to deal with. And it's, I guess it anticipated what's now called banning, in terms of social media today.
Right.
Chairman, you you have the African People Socialist Party has a newspaper. It's a great newspaper. I've become familiar. I'm a subscriber. The Burning Spear. Was that intended to be sort of in the tradition of these other papers that you talk about, and also how important is it to have a newspaper and to be able to speak directly to your followers and supporters and the public, rather than having to go through mainstream media, Google, YouTube, but to be able to go directly? And is that also maybe something that makes you more of a threat, and possibly one of the reasons why you were targeted with prosecution?
It's a possibility that that's the case because for us, and we're not doing a tenth of what it is that we feel like we should be doing with the Burning Spear newspaper. But for us, the Burning Spear newspaper gives us an opportunity also to take this paper out. Individuals who are in our party have a responsibility of selling that newspaper, going door to door, or finding other venues to which we can sell that newspaper, engage people in discussions. I mean, it gives us an opportunity to walk up to a complete stranger and start talking to them about China, what's happening in China, what do you think about Iran, people we never met before, etc. And then people begin to look for us. If they missed the newspaper, they began to look for us and things like that. So yeah, it was this entire need to go directly to the people and not having to go through ruling class mediums in order to do that. And when we do it best, we are able to go and organize in the communities where people live. Take that newspaper. We had something in St. Louis that we call Studies on the Stoop, where we would have people with our newspaper, would find groups of people who may just be sitting on a pleasant day outside on their porch, what we call the stoop, and engage people in political education right there, using the newspaper as a means to do that. So that's part of what we think influence and gave some incentive to the government to attack us. And as you know, we also have radio station, and
Right.
and we're in the process of we've got a license for another radio station for here in St. Louis. So being able to use to communicate directly to the people is a critical thing for us. And yes, it's influenced by the whole trajectory that we found with Marcus Garvey, with Muhammad, with Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X and Muhammad Speaks, the Black Panther Party. At one juncture, the Black Panther Party, the Black Panther newspaper, and the Burning Spear were the two remaining African liberation papers here. In fact, Huey P. Newton made the statement in 1989, the year that he was killed. I think it was that year that we had him at the Uhuru House in Oakland, California, because he had been driven out of political life by a number of factors. But and he made the statement. He said that you may not have the Black Panther Party, but you have the Uhuru House. You may not have the Black Panther newspaper, but you have the Burning Spear. So you see that they haven't done anything by crushing one organization. And so, yeah, it's a part of that same tradition. That's what we represented, yeah.
Well, you did a great job just now giving us a kind of history of the 20th century of black journalism, starting with the Pittsburgh Courier. Of course, when I hear that name, I think of Wendell Smith, the really very important sports writer who covered Jackie Robinson's debut. And then after listing the Negro world, you mentioned a lot of Chicago in there, right? Between Muhammad Speaks, and I would also have referenced the Chicago Defender.
Yes.
And I remember, you drive down what's called the Stevenson Expressway here, and there was always a great big neon sign, Muhammad Speaks, alongside the highway there. It was a landmark, a landmark for me as a kid growing up. Not far from there is Hyde Park, Chicago, and Jackson Park. near the Museum of Science and Industry, where this past week there was a great deal of fanfare of what's known as the Obama Presidential Center, not to be confused with the national presidential libraries that are built to house the papers of each former president. I think you know where I'm going with this. So I'll say a lot of fanfare here in Chicago, but it masked sort of the lack of unanimity. You get the impression that there was a great deal that it was a universal support and for this $800 million project that's taken over public land. In fact, a historic park that was part of the Chicago World's Fair, and a park designed by Frederick Law Olmsted that's gone now, and it's been cemented over with the obelisk in honor of the Obama presidency. What's your take on that building, that center, and the kind of hoopla that's generated to support that?
I think that Barack Hussein Obama was extremely important to this system. You remember that, well, first of all, just think about this. Of all the people who the ruling class could have selected to run for office, they didn't pick a Jesse, they didn't pick an Al, they picked somebody like with the name Barack Hussein Obama. That's an extraordinary thing to start with. I mean, it just seems like, Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackal had sold, themselves better than anybody. And so here this guy comes out of the blue. And then he becomes the selected presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. And he does a wonderful job. He was eloquent. He was able to talk about there's no Black America, there's no white America, there's just America. And he was much needed at a time where the United States was not in good favor for much of the world. You got to remember, he's following people like Bush and the rest of them, and especially Bush Jr., who had this remarkable reputation, had presided over wars against oppressed people everywhere. And this guy comes along, and he comes along, and so you have the colonizer in blackface, you have white power in blackface, and it's extraordinary. I mean, white people would actually come to his rallies carrying openly armed to the teeth, in threatening mode and what have you. On more than one occasion, his campaign offices were attacked, destroyed by people who, because he was African, and these were white people who didn't like the notion that this guy was running. But they wouldn't report it because they didn't want anybody to know that this stuff was happening. They didn't want to disrupt this narrative that they were creating. As Obama would attempt to facilitate about somehow the race-based politics and animosity, had disappeared. When Obama came through St. Petersburg, Florida, he should have fired somebody because when he came to St. Petersburg, Florida, which is where our movement had been located for I don't know how many years, still there. This is one of the places they attacked on July 29, 2022. We went in and we carried a banner hidden in that just said, "What about the Black community, Obama?" and started to chant. And this is the first time you saw this smooth-talking guy stutter because he couldn't have a response to just this question. What about the Black community? Because if he raised the issue of the Black community, he never could have been elected if he had talked about the condition of Black people, because he said himself that he was this clean slate that anybody can write what they thought and give him, define him in the fashion that was important to them. So anyway, they got this guy and he's supposed to represent this magnificent leap for black people and the big change that's made in the world. He is colonialism and blackface, and they needed that, and they still need that. And when I say they now, I'm not talking about there's this unity among the leaders of the rulers in this country around this question. As you know, they are split in a lot of different ways in terms of the direction that U.S. world domination should go and how it should look. But he is needed by a serious sector of the rulers in this country. Certainly that group that we would characterize as the Atlanticist bloc. The ones, so here they need that, and they need to hold up Obama as this really important, signally significant event in the history of this country. And they're too late. It's not going to stick. And more people, Africans, because they need black people to remember to believe in this guy. I mean, when we ran for office in St. Petersburg, Florida, in 2017, we ran Jesse Neville, a white guy, for mayor, and we ran Akili and Nai. We were charged for this too. This is part of the Russian plot that we were told. We ran Comrade Akili and Nai for city council. And Jesse's campaign slogan was unity through reparations. And it was really interesting because at one of the debates that we had that for the mayor, they sent 27 carloads of cops to a debate at the Hilton Hotel. This is the mayor's debate because up until then they had been passive, no consequence, and nobody would come out to them. But when we started coming and raising these issues, people started showing up. And this white guy, who was running maybe for mayor himself, he said to Jesse, Mr. Neville, you got your reparations with Obama. So Obama was your reparations. And if you don't like it, go back to Africa. Of course, Jesse is a white guy. So, but this was the significance. And many people, really, I believe, really good white people voted for Obama, I believe, because they thought he was going to be different, because they really believed that he was going to make a difference in things like that. And of course, he did make a difference. He didn't make a difference at all.
Chairman, let me ask you, as long as we have you here, we'd love to talk a little bit about what's going on in the world. I mean, as we record this show, what is it, June 23rd today?
Yeah.
We have, let's just start with Iran, and then we'd like to maybe get your thoughts on the situation in Cuba and Venezuela as well. But let's just start with Iran. Right now we have a memorandum of understanding, which is somewhat of an extraordinary document that wants to, if you look at it, it looks like it's like we're going to bring Iran into the world of nations. We're going to treat them like any other people, this civilization that's been there for 3,000 years, and we're going to respect them. And it's sort of acknowledgement of the fact that we lost the war to them. But then, on the other hand, we've got the World Cup going on, and Iranians still must be treated as security threats and terrorists. They can come and play, but then they have to leave the country immediately and go to Mexico. What's your thoughts on what's your thoughts on whether this war is going to end, how it's going to end, and what is your what can you tell us about your perspective?
The world has changed. There's no way. They're not going to be able to put the genie back in the bottle. The world has changed. I was looking at a picture, perhaps today or yesterday, of Vance in Switzerland, where this memorandum is supposed to be signed by the U.S. and by Iran. And there was this picture that they showed with the representative from Iran walking in to the meeting. And he came late he was late, obviously intentionally late. And he walked in, like he was in charge of the situation. And he refused to shake Vance's hand even. And I'm reminded somewhat of a sentence I've heard where somebody was convicted and sentenced to do what we've already been doing. And then here, they say that Iran has to show them, convince them that they're not going to make nuclear weapons. That's something Iran has already said it's not going to do. Virtually every concession that Iran was supposed to make was something they have already done. They're going to release. They had hijacked, I forgot how many billions of dollars from Iran. And that money, much of that money is going to be released to Iran. So this is a real hollow victory, if that's what they want to characterize it as. But the thing about Iran that is important also is that it showed the limitations of U.S. Military power and capacity. It really did. The Iranians demonstrated that if you fight, you can win. If you can resist, you can win. So part of what happened with the Iranian excursion by the United States is they put on full display for people who they've already considered defined as adversaries, like Russia and China, of what it is that they have the ability to do. China and Russia, you know that they watched this entire thing. Not only did they watch it, but it's clear that they gave support to Iran in critical ways. And then, in addition to that, you have a situation where the threat to China around Taiwan. What does this mean in terms of the strategic trajectory of U.S. power? What does that mean around Taiwan, and which is Chinese territory? What does it mean, even the threat that's being made to other places in the world? And will Cuba be encouraged by what they've seen just now in terms of being able to hold steadfast, and other peoples, etc.? So this is an extraordinary thing. We became engaged with the Iranian issue in the African People Socialist Party in 1970. I think that was the year of the of the Iranian Revolution, if I'm not mistaken.
79.
79. And what happened was when the Iranians took that nest of spies, as they characterized it, in Tehran, and they started this countdown, about the nest of the hostages and tie yellow ribbon around the old oak tree kind of stuff, and raise up, this white nationalist fervor inside the United States. In the most prestigious state university in Florida, the University of Florida, there were these nighttime rallies that were held by students who were chanting, "Send the Klan to Iran." What the hell does the Ku Klux Klan have to do with the Iranian issue? They were saying, "Sand niggers, go home." These were chants coming from the college campuses, and people were attacking what they thought were Iranians because they didn't know the difference between a Persian and an Arab, and they were just attacking anybody who they suspected could have been Iran. This was happening in this country, so we initiated a demonstration in solidarity with the people of Iran in Gainesville, Florida, where this was going on. And the demonstration that we held had hundreds of African people in solidarity with Iran. And then the demonstration was attacked by mobs of frothing at the mouth white people attacked the demonstration. They took the red, black, and green flag of ours and tore it up and what have you. And then I called for a demonstration for the next week. I wasn't at that particular demonstration, and we marched again, despite the fact that the local Gainesville Sun told people not to show up. The black preachers told people not to come out, and we marched again. And before we got there, we got the message that there were hundreds of of white people, motorcyclists and things like that, waiting. They were drinking and the cops were all around, etc. So we marched in on them. And we marched there, they were chanting, America, 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 America. I mean, it was like a lynch mob group of people. And we marched straight through them. And I took the stand on this makeshift platform and told them the sand niggers are here. And when I stepped down, the police said to us, well, we're only authorized to come this far with you. And I told them, you can leave, it's all right, you can leave. And so we started marching. And we were followed by mobs, these mobs of white people carrying the American flag, some of them in pickup trucks and what have you, until we crossed over into the black community. And then we stopped and did a Bruce Lee. And when we crossed over, Africans started coming out of clubs and out of their homes and what have you, and they were all this American and stuff, and the newspaper quoted them as saying, "You're not in America now," and chased them out of the community. This was a colonial question, and we had unity with the Iranian people then. We were meeting with the Iranians. We demonstrated with the Iranians who had to have sacks over their heads with holes cut in for eyes because of Savak, which was a terrorist organization had been created by the CIA to control the people in Iran. So it was just an extraordinary situation. But now you look at it, we talk about how they thought, because they were in Los Angeles with this FIFA. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thing that, because this is where so many of the Iranians are located, and many of them, they are presumed to be loyal to the old monarchy that was in Iran. And so that was something that would, be problematic. But when they got there, they were shocked at how the Iranians were received.
That's right.
Because the Iranians have become champions of the oppressed peoples all around the world. And they came with symbols and things of all the little children, the girls that the United States had murdered, in Iran with this assault on Iran. So it's a major turnaround, and something has changed in this country, in this world. And I think the attack on our movement was an expression of this thing that's changed in the world, and how these efforts are being made to put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak. But it won't work. It's a whole new situation now.
Well, that's a great observation you made about FIFA. I was also surprised at the reaction that the public had to the Iranian team, quite favorable. I also think it bears referencing that at the beginning of the hostage crisis, the Iranian revolutionaries made their feelings known when they released all the African American and, if I'm not mistaken, Latino Marines who were assigned to the embassy within the first week or so of the hostage taking.
Yes, and all the women.
And all the women. That's
yes.
Right. So I think, were making solidarity with oppressed people in the United States in a very eloquent statement. Right.
Yes.
That release.
And they also they made a stamp of Malcolm X with Malcolm X's picture. They loved Malcolm X. The Iranians did. They loved Malcolm X even back then. So this was a solidarity, and Khomeini, by the way, had made the statement. You can find this. You can Google and find Khomeini making the statement. I've forgotten which one of these notable talking heads that he was talking to, when he talked about how they freed the women, because Islam has a tremendous respect for women, and he said we refuse the black because they're oppressed in the United States as well, and that's why they're here, because they're oppressed people, etc. It's only one Negro state.
Is that right?
One refused to. His name, I don't know if his name was, well, anyway, one refused to leave when we're given opportunities to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about what are your thoughts on what's happening in Cuba, the blockade, the situation there, and do you have any predictions? I know you've spent time in Cuba. You've been invited there to speak. You have friends there. What what do you think is going to happen to that island?
Well, it's hard to say right now, truthfully. The reason why it's a little complicated is because it's like what the U.S. had done twice. One, in terms of Venezuela. It moved all of this armament and it had all of this talk about what it was going to do, so much so that it was difficult for it not to do it, even if they knew the disaster that was waiting for them when they got to Iran. And they did the same thing with Iran. It was almost necessary for them to attack after they had moved all the armament. They're going to crush them. They're going to do all these things, and with all of that bombast. And they've done the same thing with Cuba. And the thing that makes this a bit complicated is, well, first of all, this wouldn't be the first time the United States has attacked Cuba since the revolution. As you know, the Bay of Pigs, they met a resounding, crushing defeat with the Bay of Pigs. And I think that here they are also faced with the losses in Iran. They are faced with the losses in terms of the issue of putting ground troops into Cuba, which would be something that would be absolutely necessary. If they attack Cuba, they would have to put ground troops in there as well, which seems to me to be a disastrous kind of proposition for them. They don't want to put ground troops in Iran even because of that kind of fight, and those bodies that would definitely be coming back was not something that would be welcome. So it's hard to say. I don't know. For example, right now we see that I get information that the Venezuelan government has made severe concessions to the United States, serious concessions to the United States. And I don't know how the Cuban government is perceiving, its capacity right now, because they have really created a lot of damage in Cuba. A lot of children have died. Other people, medications, and stuff like that are not available to the people. And so I don't know how the Cubans can perceive this. And the thing is that, I think the Cubans could be encouraged by what they see in Iran, but I don't think there's anything that would encourage them about what they see in the United States in terms of a genuine movement. Because I think a real movement of significance, an anti-colonial movement in the United States, would preoccupy the United States to such an extent that it would have to use its hands to cover its ass as opposed to arming itself to do harm in Cuba. So I think one of the weaknesses that exists is not on the Cuba side. Cuba has been extraordinary in terms of its history. One of the remaining internationalist movements you find in the world, sent people all over Africa, and even Che, who was Argentinian, but he went throughout Africa with the objective of initiating a continental-wide guerrilla war for the liberation of all Africa. The Cubans are the ones who forced the United States, Fidel, to free Hugo Chavez, that is to say, the military, when they first did that two-day coup or something like that. It was Fidel who really chastised them and forced them to free Chavez. The Cubans have such a great reputation. We know about Assata Shakur, who just died there, but Robert Williams in 1957, when he was fighting the Klan in Monroe, North Carolina, had to escape into Cuba. The Cubans gave him a radio station, Radio Free Dixie, that he was able to use to broadcast from Cuba into the United States. The Cubans, they've just been, Huey P. Newton was in exile in Cuba. All kinds of forces were given support. Eldridge Cleaver was there. I'm not sure they didn't regret that, but the fact is that the Cubans have played such an incredible historic role. And when you look at even the success of the revolutionary movements in places like Nicaragua and others, you can see Cuba's handprints in those struggles as well.
Yeah,
So
not to mention, of course, Cuba sending troops to Angola and the
yes,
liberation of Angola,
and they broke the back of the South African.
defeating the South African army at Quito Carnivale, one of the most historic battles of the
Yes,
20th century. That's why Nelson Mandela's first trip abroad as president of South Africa wasn't to Europe, it wasn't to the United States, it wasn't even to another African country, it was to Cuba,
right.
right? Because of the sacrifices of Cuban society in the interest of African liberation.
Yes,
That's an enormous record, a tremendous record that
yes,
can't be erased. And it's really sad when you see the United States government indict Raul Castro, as they have a 94-year-old man, over defending, as Minister of Defense, defending his country from the so-called Brothers to the Rescue, who were leafleting Havana on unauthorized flights. And who knows
yeah,
what else they would have dropped
yeah,
on the capital city
yeah,
after bombing hotels the week
yes,
before.
yes. Yeah, and the thing is that if you listen to how they talk about Iran, they talk about Iran has been this despotic country and doing all these crimes in the regions for 47 years. And what they mean since the Iranian Revolution, since the Iranians got rid of the Shah, since that den of spies was exposed and turned into a museum. So everybody who wants to can go to Iran and see the evidence of what the United States was doing there, how they ran Iran from that embassy for years, and how they created Savak, which was this secret terroristic political police that they had there. I mean, and so now they're charging, and they charged Venezuela for stealing their oil. What the hell is this? How does U.S. oil get on the Venezuelan soil? I mean, this is what they've done, and I don't know how much longer this stuff is going to fly. I think the world has changed, and the question I think we really are confronted with is how this transformation that we are obviously witnessing and experiencing right now is going to reflect itself in the world. I know that it's significant that when you see the U.S. president having to, I don't know how many times this president has said that they won in Iran, and then had to come back and say, well, we'll win next week. Didn't do it this time, but in 2 days, we're going to kill everybody in Iran, etc. And none of this worked. The Iranians have been steadfast, and they have really become heroic figures right now to oppress and colonize peoples all around the world.
That's right. And I think, one example of their resolve, which I always like to mention, is that, the students that took over the American embassy, before they took over the embassy, the American personnel shredded all the documents, I'm talking about, tons and tons of paper, right? Shredded into little slips. The resolve of those students was such that they reconstructed all those documents. And there are research libraries in the United States that have it. It's like From the Belly of the Beast or From this Den of Thieves, something along those lines. Volumes, published volumes
That's
of all the secret
extraordinary.
documents that they meticulously put back together, taping each little strip onto a wall. And if they have that kind of resolve, I mean, I think that's the kind of resolve you see in their defense today. But that defense today has repercussions, as you've been pointing out, around the world. And I wonder how you see it being read in Russia, where there's apparently a great deal of impatience with the length of the special military operation, and now there are greater calls for Russia to step up its fight against Ukraine and the West. How do you see these two? And also, I must mention the alliance or the partnership between Iran and Russia. So how do you see this playing out?
Well, I think that I think everybody was surprised that this thing with Ukraine has lasted as long as it has. But the Russia has not just been fighting Ukraine. It's been fighting the United States. It's been fighting this NGA, this non-governmental, non-geospatial capacity that the United States has with satellites that can they've actually bombed and killed generals in Moscow from drones that's controlled by these satellites and things like that. So Russia has been fighting against the United States, and neither of them has been able up to now to openly declare that this fight is happening. It has to be done like through proxies and stuff. Otherwise, at the point where they can declare they're at war with each other, then there's a whole new ball game that's involved. You're talking about the nuclear possibilities and things like that, because the population would demand a fight back against the United States as the primary target. So I think that you see this proxy war that's happening, and the U.S. is doing a lot of damage right now. I mean, they're bombing through drones and other things. Like, remember they did something like this in Afghanistan when Afghanistan was aligned with the Soviet Union. And they had set up a whole new government, got rid of all of the opium, and got rid of all the oppression of women that they seem to care so much about now. And they gave the stingers to this reactionary Afghans who that were effective against Russian helicopters and what have you. And that's the thing that turned the tide for the U.S. in Afghanistan. And Afghanistan, remember, where Afghanistan is located in terms of its proximity also to Russia. And so these are factors, that are at play. And so, it's hard to really say exactly how this stuff is going to unfold. But I know Russians have learned a lot. And China, they're learning a lot by how the United States is conducting this war. They learned a lot by how the United States makes war at this time in history. They've learned a lot, both China and Russia. Again, the strategic, see the United States and all major powers, they have, they have a strategic projection that they made in terms of what the future is going to look like and what they can hold. I mean, obviously, you remember how they used to talk about the significance of Taiwan, and if the China moves toward Taiwan, they have to be prepared. They can't talk now. I mean, there's no way in hell, after what they're watching, what the Chinese and everybody's watching and experiencing, the utilization, how the Iranians would use tactics of unleashing a multifaceted, what do they call them? These missiles that could explode in several fragments and what have you.
The multiple re-entry vehicles, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the U.S. is spending $1 million trying to shoot all of those things down over and over again. The so-called Iron Dome is now laid in Israel. I mean, Russia is watching all of this. China is watching all of this, and they're advising and providing resources to Iran. This so-called, what's that missile called? The supersonic missiles and
Hypersonic.
Yeah, hypersonic. I mean, that's China, et cetera. So this is stuff that we are watching right now. The equations have changed considerably, and then they're talking about how they talk about the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, being factors here as well. You see a whole realignment and consolidation of realignment of forces in the world, and the world is getting smaller and smaller for the U.S. and larger for others. I mean, Starmer from England just had to resign. Just this major transformation happening in the whole world, and it's not going to be the same anymore. Not going to be the same anymore. And then at the same time, we see stuff trying to happen in places like Africa, the Sahel being, just an example, and one example. but other places. But there's stuff happening in Africa every day that doesn't get reported. These wars. The U.S. is involved in more than 100 wars, like it has been throughout Africa, and what have you. It cannot continue in this fashion. And people being encouraged, seeing the French kicked out of Africa and various places. People, yeah, it's a whole new day. Yeah.
Oh, Omali, you were one of the prominent voices against the proxy war in against Russia.
Yes.
And I personally believe that that's why you were targeted, because if you look at the timing, you know, the Russia invades Ukraine in February, I think 23rd, 2022, and at that point, the government is trying to rally support and get U.S. taxpayers to pony up hundreds of millions of dollars to fight this war. You opposed it publicly, and you have a large following. And you know, you also pointed out, and you had been doing this for a decade before, about the fact that Russia is being forced into this war. And there was, in the indictment against you, where it was alleged that you were acting as an agent of Russia and that you're spreading Russian disinformation, they cite a speech that you gave on February 27th of 2022, just a few days after the invasion, where you point out that yes, this is caused by NATO expansion, something you'd been talking about for 10 years, 800 miles towards the border of Russia. You talked about how that Ukraine has been armed to the teeth by the white colonizers, that Ukraine represents a dagger pointed right at the heart of Russia. This is sort of the colorful language that you're known for, and that makes you maybe so dangerous, because and is part of the reason why you have such a loyal following. And you pointed out that you know, that Ukraine was a place that Russia could no longer retreat from. They had to stand and fight. And you also point out that in 2014, the coup, where a democratically elected president of Ukraine was removed, a CIA-led coup, which came up at your trial, of course. We talked about this, but and they overthrew that guy to put in somebody that was NATO friendly. So so I guess my question is, you know, you ended up being prosecuted for this, for taking this dissident position. You and the Uhuru Three. I was privileged to be part of the legal team, and also privileged to get to know you, Omali, and call you a friend. But you know, you took a stand, and you were punished for it. You had, I think it was July, as you mentioned, in July of 2022, you were raided by FBI SWAT teams, not only your personal home and the homes of the other prominent members of the African People Socialist Party, but also your offices. All the files were taken, all the computers were taken. And yet you've continued to do this work, you've continued to speak out. Why do you keep doing it when the government has made it clear that they don't want dissident voices, especially African Americans with large followings, protesting their wars? Why do you keep speaking out?
I do it because I have to. I have felt that the attacks on me and Garvey and even Du Bois, others, represent evidence of the criticism that we make of this government and our relationship to it, and that we have to. I think we are at a very precarious situation, Black people in this country right now. Very precarious situation. It's something similar to what Ron Wilson Reagan succeeded in doing in the 80s, in terms of mobilizing masses of white people and the very white nationalist, agenda, where Reagan is the one who came up with the concept of the welfare queens, and they talked about how African people represented some kind of drag on the economy in this country, and that we were responsible for all kinds of economic and social problems here. And this was not just something that Reagan did. This was you had forces in academia, who were also running this line out. This was a prominent line that you had then. And what's the guy's name who became a senator, who coined the term of benign neglect? You know can you remember who I'm talking about? He became a senator out of New York. Anyway, I can't remember.
Patrick Moynihan.
Yeah, Patrick Moynihan.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys, and then we see with the current administration, it's doing the same thing. It's popularizing white nationalism. It's something that's bringing broad masses of white people into unity with this aggression against African people. It's offering an ideological basis for this attack, for every negative and base emotion, every problem that ordinary white people are experiencing. Now they're throwing it at black people, and they're throwing it at so-called immigrants and people who coming across the southern border, things like that. So it's an attempt to win, like mass support for what they're doing. And laws don't mean anything. It's clear that they're not concerned about the law. They change the law as it seems important and necessary for them to do that. So it's a very precarious kind of situation. I mean, when they were bringing people like the Proud Boys and arm them as ICE, when they bring in thugs like this, it's like giving permission to this kind of unleashing this kind of white nationalist frenzy against Africans and other people here. So that's this very precarious situation, I think. And that's why it's so important for us to have this discussion and discussions like this. And it's also why I think that what happened with our case, Lynn, is important as well. Because when the U.S. killed Malcolm X, there was no motion in the white community, no opposition. Even when they killed King, you saw African people who had rebelled in various cities around this country, and even at the capital, Washington, D.C. When they murdered Fred Hampton, you didn't see, right there in Chicago where you are, you didn't see uprisings among white people, etc., because there was a presumption, correctly, that there was, that they didn't see the connection. But I think we succeeded in building an anti-colonial movement that made it necessary for the first time. When they attacked us, the Black Liberation Movement, they had to attack the Black Liberation Movement as it existed in the white community, in their houses, in their neighborhoods, in their communities. That's what Penny and Jesse represented. The fact is that we have white people who are doing work for reparations and exposing genocide in 130 cities in this country. White people are doing that under our leadership and what have you. So I think this is also a part of the problem that they have, because they cannot isolate us in the same way they've been able to isolate us in the past. Newspaper, yes. And these critical questions, because people want to know about things like, killing and dying in wars and et cetera. And the U.S. now finds itself in a place similar to the end of the Vietnam War, where they had so many problems. They used to call it the Vietnam Syndrome, because they could not get the American population to agree to make wars like they used to be able to do. And so they would try to find an easy war that they can win and kill somebody, like in Somalia or some other place, to kill somebody, see we're still powerful, see we're still strong. And they did that with Venezuela. And they thought they were going to be able to do it again in Iran, but Iran stopped them. And now I think you're going to see an Iranian syndrome emerging as well, that it's not something that people are going to be as willing to jump on as in the past. We have a lot of work to do as organizers in our communities. We have a tremendous amount of work to do in terms of educating the public here and recognizing that the real question in the final analysis is in the people. It's in the people. And the government will have to respond to the will of the people as it expresses itself politically in action, in motion, etc. And that's what we try to concentrate on doing, organizing the people around these questions and building organizations, which is why we've done that. There's a photo that I'm looking at now that shows immediately after the attack, the same day they attacked us. And this is, Glenn, this is against everything that lawyers had told us. You shouldn't say anything, just be quiet, don't say anything. But the same day they attacked us, we organized. There's a photo, that's a picture that's being shown now on my front porch, where people from throughout St. Louis and came to stand with us, where we told about the attack. And we did it every day. We did it on so many instances. We created the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Fight Back. It wasn't even, it was called, what do you call it? It was defense, counter offensive is how we characterized it. And we've still been doing it. And we've opened up a new front in Latin America. We are actually talking to people and working with people who are in Venezuela. We are talking to people and working with people who are close to the struggle in Cuba that we're discussing right now. They're part of a whole new front that's come out of this Hands Off Uhuru campaign that we've been involved in. So, and I think there's a photo that we show where we're in Cuba. People are holding up Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Cuba, in this photo. So this is how we've done, and we have to do it because we've seen what's happened in the past. Did you know, probably most of your audience wouldn't know that this man called Hosea Jaffe, who wrote an extraordinary book called A History of Africa, quoted different people as saying that a third of the African population was killed during a third of 200,000, the 600,000 Africans that existed on the continent of Africa at that time were killed during these dark days of European Africa. I mean, 200,000, a third of the African population, this extraordinary continent, so rich with so much wealth and resources now, where the people are starving, because of this parasitic relationship they have with this social system, and so we have to resist. We don't have any options. I wish I did, because I'd much rather be doing something else. I really would.
Well, I for one want to thank you for your leadership, your commitment over the years, your and your vision and your voice. And we were very privileged to have you on for the past hour that just flew by. Thank you very much, and we hope to have you on again another time.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Counselor.
All right, Omali, it's great to see you, and we really enjoyed having you. And keep up the great work, and please like and subscribe to our podcast.
Right on.
And we'll be in touch.
Relentless.
All right.
Thank you.
Uhuru.